try that one? Can I try that one? And we're trying the cheeses. And then he goes, now can I try some of the secret cheeses? And I was like, what do you mean the secret cheeses? And he was like, I know you have secret cheeses. And I was like, I do, but I don't like that you know that. Well, how? I brought them home and you weren't here to find out about the secret cheeses.
That is great.
Like it is great, but you know, like the drawbacks to having an adventurous pilot child is now you have to share. I hadn't considered that.
I don't know. We're live now, by the way. Jolly just let me know. We're totally live.
Cool. Awesome.
So
Absolutely
I don't know. And then we're supposed to wait a little bit to let people
before we actually
get in.
Start. Which is good because I'm still kind of like doing my last minute little bits and pieces here. Making sure I have everything to hand.
So hi everybody. Who's made it in? I don't know if anybody's made it in yet. I'm about to open it on my phone so I can have it on silent.
I have my phone turned off. I have Do Not Disturb on, but I cannot see anything. Like I can see your face, Autumn, but nothing else.
That's good. Let's see. 2 people watching.
I cannot see.
It's very loud. There we go. Now it's quiet. Now everybody got to see that. Well, nobody got to see that. There's just a couple people there. Few people got to see that.
I'm sure there's somebody.
All right. And the face I made while that happened, that's wonderful. I'm going to make lots of faces.
I, like the first couple times that I started going live, because I'll go live from the bakery on Fridays sometimes.
Yeah, that's cool. I've been watching your TikToks lately.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's fun, but like I'm always sort of conscious of, I don't know, like it took some getting used to not be like looking at what I'm doing and being able to like see what I look like. Yeah, it's kind of a weird feeling. But, you know,
Jolly just mentioned that you seem to have a low video quality and it is kind of grainy. I don't know what you can do, what phone or whatnot.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't do anything about that. Let me check my Wi-Fi settings. So I might disappear for a second here. And just make sure it's not that. No, I am connected.
YouTube, it does look like you're going to have the narrow box, so it's not going to reach to your stove. It's just going to be in front of your china cabinet area.
Okay. Well, I won't spend much time in front of the stove. I'm not sure there's anything I can do about the video quality. I'm sorry to say. How bad is it?
Well, when you're up close, it's not terrible. Like it doesn't pixelate real bad, but when you start to get further over to your cutting board where you need to be, it gets grainy. Oh, it's grainy now. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, see, I feel like it's a connectivity issue.
Jolly has no advice on that. Bummer.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, there's not a lot. He thinks it's connectivity also, so it's probably your Wi-Fi then, is what he's thinking.
Unfortunately, we are really far out in the country, and is that bad now because I've got no headspace?
No, your head's fine. You can't get off your cutting board. The very front edge of your cutting board is cut off.
I think I'm going to move it back, and we're just going to have to kind of deal, unfortunately. Because, I can't do much about the Wi-Fi as it reaches out to rural Missouri. Hopefully.
We luckily have high speed, finally. We are loving it.
You know, I'm sorry, I keep walking back and forth here. I'm just going to get it back to where it was. There was a point at which we were supposed to get um, like fiber, but
Hmm.
they stopped like right before they got to our house. They were like,
Oh, that
fiber for
sucks.
everyone, but not you. So, okay, last time I'm
Okay.
gonna adjust this. I swear,
We are
swearsies.
5 minutes out from starting time.
Just bugs me when it's crooked. Um,
I
okay, well,
understand.
fingers crossed. We'll do the best we can here. I think I have everything here. I love your recipe cards that you made. They're just really
Thank you.
pretty and so helpful.
I stole inspiration from how I'm doing the inside of my book, my fantasy and feasts book currently.
Oh, nice.
Because I decided I don't want pictures of real food. I want all sketches.
No, I like
Uh,
that.
so
Um,
I'm using Canva at the moment, but at someday, hopefully, we'll have a real sketch
Especially
artist.
since like food photography is kind of subjective. I have these Women's Day encyclopedias. It's
Uh
the
huh.
Encyclopedia of Cooking. So it's A to Z cooking, published 1973. And they have, for
Wow.
one thing, they have like all of these like mid-century illustrations in them,
Yeah.
that like specific type of pen and ink, which I am just like feral for.
Oh
The
yeah.
other thing that
I
they have,
love
I
sketchy.
love it. I love mid-century drawing so much. But they also have a lot of food photography, and it's all like Jello molds, and it is lurid. It is the least appetizing steak tartare you have ever seen, and I love it. Like it's just a very, I don't know what it is. Like there's something really kitschy about it. I love it so much though. And like the way that the food is talked about in these cookbooks, like the entry on bananas is bonkers because it's just like, have you tried bananas? Like you've never heard of them before. And then the recipes featuring bananas are the worst things you've ever heard of. It's
Because they
literally like they
never
did not
heard
know
of
how to
them, so they didn't know
they
what to
didn't
do
know how
with
to use
them.
them. So funny. I love it though. I honestly like making food history, food fads. I love it. I think about food all day.
So this is probably surprising, but I only just discovered I like to cook like this week.
Oh, this week. Okay, so
This
this is a
week.
brand new world.
Well, okay, so I struggle to find out what I like. I'm a recovering people
Mhm.
pleaser. And I've liked cooking for a long time, but just this week I'm like, oh, I actually enjoy this. So I just didn't know that I was enjoying myself.
Yeah, because like sometimes, especially if you are very focused on people pleasing, it's hard to separate what you yourself are enjoying versus like the effects that it's having on other people.
Yeah.
So, like if you, for example, you're a good cook and it's always made people like give you compliments and like you and be nice to you, you need kind of a break from cooking for a while to figure out like, do I actually enjoy this? Like for me,
Yeah.
if there were
And
no
food
people
in my
around.
family is taking care of people. Like my
Hmm.
mother does it too, and it's great. She's amazing to go and give all this all the time, but like it just slowed down my
Yeah,
realization.
yeah, because you associate it with like acts of service as opposed to like,
Yes.
an artistry or some self-fulfilling activity. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm ready to make like 50 new things because I'm like, you know what? We're going to try stuff now. More stuff
Nice.
than I had been.
Uh-huh. And I don't know, like I think it's one of those things like by and large, even people who don't like cooking have to prepare food in some way for themselves. It's just so universal an activity. You have to eat. And so it's incredibly accessible for like self-expression. If,
Yeah.
you're finding out what you like, finding out how to present it, finding out how to use new ingredients. There's so much connected to it in terms of, history and storytelling and all that kind of stuff, which is like
Yeah.
why we're here. The
Yeah.
storytelling of food is it's like the gateway for a lot of people into I want to cook. They read about a feast or a meal or something, and it just sounds, even if they've never been interested in cooking before, it just sounds like something that
Sounds
would be really
so
fun to
good to
do.
eat. I love eating. I
Yeah.
know that part.
Oh my God. I
We've
love
got
eating.
about 6 people right now, and it's 1, but I think Jolly said to wait till about 5 after to really get started. So,
Yeah.
hi to everybody. Jolly will be passing on any messages, any questions from the chat. So, anytime. Should we introduce ourselves now or wait until the 5 after?
Give me 1 second to clean the
Sure.
cheese that I just grated. Oh, that's gonna be loud.
That was such a good tip, by the way. I've never done that with butter. Oh, so good. So it works so well.
Oh my gosh. It was born out of desperation because like I
Yeah.
was having to make huge quantities of pastry dough that has, like this
Yeah.
held up butter incorporated into it. It was taking forever and I realized like, oh my gosh, if we could just introduce the butter in small form, half this work
Yeah.
is done. It works so well.
Uh,
I'm never going back.
I have a biscuit that I make when my oldest really likes to make it because you have to do the butter into it, really get it in there. So he won't like this trick at all, but it's gonna work really well for that.
He can keep doing his little tactile activity. It's
Yeah.
fine. Can you hear my dog singing in the background?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, there's a clock going off, and my dog is also singing.
I
It's
hear
just
both.
kind of a loud house. He's such a pill. He's down there singing. He's at my father-in-law's, and my father-in-law went out, and so now the dog is going to let me know, and everyone else, about his loneliness. He
Oh
has a friend
well.
too. Like there's 2 of them down there, but no, it won't do that
We'll
he is
just
separated in any way.
we'll just bear with it.
Sorry.
Um so looks like we're getting more people in on YouTube. Hi everybody. You've got your grater washed. You good to think we
I think we're good to start. Yeah.
okay. You wanna go first, introduction or
Sure. I'm Hedge Bette. If you're here, you might have seen me on TikTok before. Um, but I own a small bakery. It's primarily sourdough. If it's leavened, we're not going to work with any sourdough components today because this doesn't have any yeast in it, what we're making today. But what we're making is going to be galettes. They are a butter pastry crust, and then you can put pretty much any topping you want on them, sweet or savory. And there's something that I regularly sell through my bakery. And I just the other day finished my second draft of my book. I'm very, very excited about that. Took a really long time to get the last piece of that written. I was kind of dreading it, but I got through it. And yeah, we're gonna do that. And Autumn.
I'm Autumn. You won't have seen me on TikTok unless you are reading through comments. I'm more of a lurker. But that's how I met Misty, and she found out that I am a gluten-free, dairy-free baker and asked me to hop on and chat and maybe offer a alternative crust, which we've got the ingredients should have gone all out for everything in the email, and I'm not going to demonstrate, but I'm available to answer any questions on gluten-free baking while we go ahead. Oh, and I'm also a writer.
Yeah, that's right. You've been published too.
No.
Oh,
I
sorry.
shelved a book. Sorry. No.
Okay.
I wish. I've been in the querying trenches for a while, and it's just not really marketable right now. It's a darker sci-fi, and I don't think it's gonna be picked up. So I'm shelving that one, but I've got 2 cozies that I'm writing currently and cookbooks.
That's awesome. Well, I hope to see the dark sci-fi someday. That's kind of my bag. I like that.
Well,
okay, so
you could maybe just read it if you wanted.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, where can you find it?
I can send it to you.
Okay, then send it to me.
All right,
I want to read it. I'm so serious.
I want to read yours someday because your TikToks are amazing.
Thank you. I'm both really excited and absolutely dreading having people read it because it's just so scary. Like I really didn't think I was
It's
going to get as
terrifying.
attached as I did.
It's,
But yeah, it's real bad. Okay, so we're going to start by making the crust because it needs to be refrigerated. It needs to rest for a little bit. So if you've joined any of my lives on Friday in the bakery, you'll have seen me do this like a million times. But the first thing I'm going to do is actually grate up a lot of butter here. So this recipe that we're using is the one that Autumn very, very kindly typed up in this beautiful format. And we're going to start with 1 stick of unsalted cold butter. So I'm literally just going to use a cheese grater and grate it up. And the reason that I'm doing this is because when you're making like a really flaky crust, you want to make sure that the butter doesn't melt into the flour and get fully incorporated with the flour. It needs to kind of stay distinct from the flour. So the cheese grater is just like a really, really fast way of doing that without, it like keeps the butter from melting as you're trying to work with it. It cuts it into like kind of perfectly small pieces. And then you want to handle it as little as possible so it doesn't melt. And then we're going to add the flour on top of that. And you can sift these ingredients ahead of time, but I'm just going to kind of dump them on top here for the sake of time. So I'm going to start with 1/3 of a cup of pastry flour, and then I'm going to do 2/3 of a cup of bread flour. And the reason that I'm using the 2 different kinds of flour is that bread flour is very high in gluten, which makes it, so there's bread flour, there's all-purpose flour, there's different like, you know, types of flours that have different effects on whatever you're making. So bread flour is really good for making sourdough because it can get very stretchy. And we want it to be able to roll out this dough and kind of shape it a little bit. But the pastry flour, which is this one right here, is very, very low gluten. That doesn't mean that it's gluten-free by any means, but it means that it will create a crumblier kind of dough. So we're going to like just cut our bread flour a little bit with some of that. And we're going to do 2/3 of a cup of the bread flour. This is a super, super simple dough to make. It's really versatile. You can make tiny galettes, you can make big ones. And it's just, yeah, it's a really nice butter pastry. Okay, and then I need 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. I'm kind of a measure with your heart kind of girl. So like,
same.
Yeah, I tend to just sort of throw things. Then once you've got like the flour and the butter and the salt in here, we're going to just very gently break up that flour so that like each one of those little like cheese grated bits of butter is coated with flour, but we're not squishing it in. We want to make sure that the butter just stays sort of coated in small, tiny little shreds, and that way the crust will be flaky. If it gets smooshed too much into the flour, starts to warm up and melt, then we're going to end up with a tough pastry dough. It won't have that like melts in your mouth flakiness, crunchiness to it.
We've got a couple questions coming in whenever you got a moment.
Okay, go for it.
Is Sarah's Bookish macarons, I'm always saying that wrong, is pastry flour similar to cake flour?
Yes, very similar. And you can use them pretty interchangeably, yeah.
When I was looking up for how to transfer it, they both have less gluten than regular flour and bread flour.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not even going to try and say I'm so sorry about names, guys. I can't pronounce anything I learned by reading. Which flour did you say was good for sourdough? Is that the bread flour?
Bread flour. And I recommend, if you can get it, I recommend King Arthur bread flour. It's a really nice blend. The bread flour that I use is from a local mill, so I don't think it's in like really broad distribution, but that mill does supply some flour to King Arthur brand flour. So that one is my favorite outside of my usual bakery flour. Okay, so I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of cold water here. It says ice water on the recipe, which is like, that's the best because you're trying to, again, keep the butter from melting. We're just going to add some cold water here. I pretty much work everything with my hands, and I'm just very gently incorporating this. And the reason I like to work dough with my hands is so I can actually feel how incorporated things are, feel the temperature of the dough, know when I'm overworking it. So I just get messy every time. And as soon as all the flour is incorporated, we're gonna stop. Because this isn't really something you want to knead. You want to make sure that it stays really tender and flaky and sort of barely worked.
For the gluten-free one too, you want to just make sure that everything is wet. If you need a little more water, because sometimes sometimes it's off because the way they absorb. You can just put a thumbprint of more water, work it around it. But mine's nothing to do with gluten overworking, just the butter.
Yeah, and so like that's it. We're done kneading together this dough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it into 2 pieces now. Now, I have on the recipe that this would make 3 single-serve, like 100-gram galettes. But because we're just going to make 2 kinds here, I'm just going to put a little extra filling on them, and we're just going to have 2 galettes. So I'm going to roll them into balls and kind of smoosh them down to make them a little easier to roll out later. So they just look like these little pucks. And then I'm going to put them in the refrigerator. And we'll leave them in there for probably about 30 minutes. Smooshing also helps them to cool down a little bit faster. And this is going to help the dough relax. Because if you've ever made like a pie crust that is pulled down when you stuck it in the oven, sometimes that's due to, it can be any number of things, too much water in the dough, but it can also just be because there is gluten in all wheat flour. And so these doughs, if you don't give them time for the gluten to soften and relax by letting it rest, and it's water that does that, it's the autolyzing process. If you don't give it time to do that, when you go to roll it out, it's going to want to keep pulling back. Gluten's like a rubber band. It's a very tough molecule. So we're going to let them rest like that for about 30 minutes or so.
I'm pretty sure on my recipe, the chilling is more about keeping everything really cold so all of the butter doesn't just melt out of it because there's no gluten to try and stiffen. It's good for it to absorb the water a little bit. We got another question, and we were talking about this before we started. Do you keep your flowers in the freezer? If so, do you bring them to room temp before working them?
So I don't, and a lot of that is just because I go through flour really fast. Like I go through minimum 2 50-pound bags a week, and that's just because that's a bakery type of production. But I was saying that if you don't use your flowers very often, it's not a bad idea to keep them at least in the refrigerator because it helps keep them pest-free. If you're not using them very often, they do go stale. And so it helps to, preserve their longevity. It certainly doesn't hurt them to keep them in the freezer or in the refrigerator. And as Autumn was saying earlier too, it's really nice because if you are making something like this that is, a butter, like a cold butter recipe, then the flour is already cold when you go to add the butter into it. So it kind of helps to keep the butter in its place.
And I do keep all of my gluten-free flours in the freezer, mostly because gluten-free baking calls for such random different things that every single recipe is very different. And I don't know if I'm going to use it up by time it needs to be if I've already opened it. So I just keep it in the freezer. I do not wait for it to warm up. I am not a patient woman. So I just go ahead and put them in. And since most of the time things do want to be cold when they bake so that all the butter and good stuff stays inside of it. If I need melted butter, it's going to warm it up. The only time I really pay attention to temperatures is with eggs. So if the eggs need to be room temperature and my flour is like freezing the butter that I melted, I'll wait on those.
So while that is cooling off, I'm just going to show you some of my other ingredients, and I'm going to start the mushroom sautéing. So one of the galettes is going to be a mushroom galette. So I've got like chopped onions here, and I've got my cut mushrooms. I cut them pretty thick because I want them to be, like substantial on the top of the galette. That's just my personal preference.
I like mushrooms are made
right?
that way.
Like like little steak bites of mushrooms. So I'm going to start sauteing those in a pan right behind me. And you just have to kind of watch my back for a second here.
Well, now you've disappeared now from YouTube.
I've disappeared entirely? Oh no, I'm off. I'm so sorry.
YouTube is narrow, but that's okay. If you're doing quick, you'll be back. You're back.
It'll just be a second here, but I'm going to put some butter in this pan and a little bit of olive oil just to stop the butter from burning, and make sure that everything gets its due, its amount. So I feel like. Go ahead.
I'm reading different questions, and somebody just asked if you ever use fake butter in yours.
I don't, just because it's not like an allergy that I have. I don't have, any dairy considerations personally. And for the bakery, gluten-free and dairy-free, if you're going to properly advertise, in my opinion, I have several friends with celiac. If you're going to properly advertise that you make gluten-free, you need to make really gluten-free stuff. My current setup doesn't allow for me to keep those two things separated enough for my personal comfort. And the learning curve for gluten-free and dairy-free is pretty steep. I would eventually like to offer some gluten-free and dairy-free options. In pastry making, you can certainly do dairy-free. There are butter substitutes. I just haven't used any yet. Butter works really well.
My favorite right now is a plant butter that's from Country Crock, and they have several different ones, but I like the avocado because I'm allergic to olive oil. So, but different oils, coconut oil that's solid will. Shortening is a really good butter substitute.
Coconut oil is pretty great, and it has a really high smoke point too.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of health benefits. You have to like the flavor of coconut, it is going to impart a little coconut flavor. But I really like it for all kinds of different things. I've made caramel sauces with coconut cream before, and I think they're totally superior to just a regular caramel sauce.
Oh yeah, coconut is the whole ratio of water is off, and it's awful to have to figure out. But coconut is a really good gluten-free ingredient.
All right, so I've just put all those mushrooms in the pan, and they're going to saute for a bit. We're making two kinds of galettes. We're making the mushroom and cheese one. So the cheese is here. It's 50% cream cheese, 50% chèvre. And I just warmed it up and put just a little bit of milk in there to help make it more spreadable. So this was the consistency of it. So when we're making the galette, we'll be able to spread it really easily on the galette. And then I have thyme over here that I got from my garden that we'll put into the mushrooms and onions in just a minute. And this is Gruyere, which we'll put on top just a little bit. I love Gruyere. It's one of my favorite cheeses. And then for the sweet one, something that I neglected to mention when I was giving Autumn the ingredients for the toppings is that I used Granny Smith apples, but I did blanch them in sugar water first. Oh. So I sliced them, and in order to make sure that they have a nice consistency, because on the surface of the galette, we're going to kind of fan them around and try to make it look pretty. But to make sure that they're not dried out as they bake and not too crunchy, I just quickly put them in some boiling sugar water. It's about 2 cups of water to a cup of sugar. And you can either save out that sugar water and make a syrup out of it or something, or, whatever you want to do with it. But basically, just to make sure that the apples had a little extra pop of sweetness and that they were going to be a good consistency when they get baked and not dry out. So they've been blanched, and they're just kind of sitting there waiting for that. And I did already make the caramel sauce that we'll put on top of that galette. It's super, super easy to make. It's basically just the butter, the brown sugar, and the white sugar that you see in the ingredients that Autumn very kindly typed into Canva. And
we can't read that at all.
Is it backwards? Yeah.
No, it's just so blurry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that it's so grainy. I don't know what's going on with my
It's
internet right now, but either way, the caramel sauce is super easy to make. You just melt the butter and you like melt down the brown sugar and the white sugar in there, and then you add the heavy whipping cream last, and that makes it. Or you can add coconut cream. That's where you can substitute it, and you can substitute coconut oil for the butter in this part of the recipe as well. These
uh,
mushrooms won't take
go
too
ahead.
long to saute.
That's good.
We're just gonna give them a quick
You're getting a
toast.
lot of good compliments on your TikTok. Everybody wants you to know how awesome your TikTok is.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I have had such a good time on TikTok in the last year. I'm so grateful for like the book talk community. You know, like I hear people complain about this and that, and there's always dramas in any community, but honestly, it's been one of the like the nicest, most creative groups of people I've ever had the good fortune to like stumble into the midst of. And, you know, I crack wise about like romance books a lot, but I wouldn't be doing that if I wasn't reading them. Like I like that genre a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm really happy to be there. And I love doing stupid skits on TikTok, so I'm glad. I'm glad it's working out for all of us. I'm
I
taking
mean,
time right now. It's just fresh time from my garden, so I'm gonna add that. I'm sorry you can't see it very well. It's very
no,
tiny. You wouldn't be
it's
able to
better
see it
now.
well anyway.
You're doing good.
Okay. I'm gonna add that to the mushrooms that are sauteing. I'll be right back.
On your savory one, I would recommend people go ahead and buy commercial replacements for those cheeses. Like they make dairy free.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, I want to say sour cream, but is that not the right one?
Cream
What's
cheese.
it? Cream cheese. Thank
There's
you.
cream cheese and chèvre, which is like the soft goat's cheese, and Gruyere.
Some people might be able to do the goat cheese because some people who have lactose problems can handle it. If you don't
Yeah.
know, don't like be careful
Hmm.
because you know
Yeah.
what dairy does to you.
Yeah.
But
My husband is lactose intolerant, so his solution mostly is just to leave cheese out of things.
yeah,
But you know,
I just keep
butter.
trying to figure out how to make things cheese like.
Yeah. Do you find it's like a consistency issue a lot of the time, or is it really like flavor?
I've almost got the consistency down because you can do it with like almond milk and cornstarch, but sometimes that cheese flavor just isn't there, and
Mhm.
the nutritional yeast just isn't it for me.
Yeah.
So I buy
It's
some
funny,
shredded
like,
store bought to sprinkle in.
hmm I haven't been in a Whole Foods for a minute, but I feel like they always have some like decent cheese substitute options.
My favorite, just it changes all the time. It changes.
I wonder, um, I don't know, I wonder if any Asian markets would. We have a number of like really good Asian markets where I live, and um, they'll
Don't
sometimes
know.
have cheese alternative or dairy alternative options. So
The
it's kind of
Asian
interesting.
food has a lot of good options, honestly.
Yeah, because dairy is not as popular, especially in like Chinese and Japanese cooking
And
traditionally.
they use so much rice flour. I get so many starts in my recipes looking
Mm-hmm.
at different Asian style recipes because they really know how to make the texture just really good.
So I didn't cook these mushrooms for too long because they are going to cook on the top of the galette as well. But the onions, got caramelized real quick. Well, they got takes takes too much patience to caramelize them here, but they've been um, sautéed, and the mushrooms have a little bit of nice crispy on them, and the thyme has been activated. You could put garlic in this, but I'm one of those people who puts garlic in everything, and I intentionally left it out of this recipe because I want to make sure that like the more delicate flavors of the cheeses and the mushrooms came forward. So no garlic in this one, but you could absolutely add it if you wanted to. Okay, so
Always more garlic.
yeah, like I am absolutely one of those people who I never believe a recipe. Like when it calls for 4 cloves of garlic, I'm like, oh, so I mean, minimum 8, obviously.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, we put garlic. All right. So to make sure we've got enough time to bake our galettes, normally, like I said, I would leave them in there for 30 minutes, but I'm going to pull the dough out just a little bit early here. And now we get to do the fun part, which is putting them together. And hopefully you can see that like these are not hard to make, and you can kind of put anything on them.
I was surprised how easily it went the first time I tried mine. I was terrified because I didn't know. So I'm interested to see your folding technique, but I think it goes really easy, like you said.
Now, one of the other reasons to chill the dough is it's definitely easier to work with when it's cold. So like this isn't absolutely ideal. I like it really cold because it's nice and stiff and it hangs together much more easily. So what we're going to do is once I have it rolled out like this, I'm going to transfer it back onto the parchment paper so that once it's assembled, I don't have to pick it up. And I just kind of recommend that anyway, just as a practice with this type of pastry. And then it can just stay on the parchment paper.
And you cook it on the parchment paper, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love parchment paper. I use it for like everything. I really do. Like I use it for pretty much everything that goes in the oven. And you can see here, this is probably like about an 1/8-inch thickness that I've rolled it out to here, right? So I've got a nice disc here. It's not too thick. It's not so thin that it's not going to provide some support. And we'll start with the mushroom galette here. So this is the cheese mixture, cream cheese and chèvre. And you can see I'm making like a very large galette here. If you were making the individual recipe, probably it would be much smaller. And you would put less cheese on here. But we're going to eat this later, so I'm going all in for it. And I'm going to spread the cheese kind of all the way out to the edges, not like off the edges, but when we fold the edges over, it's really nice to have some of the filling underneath that dough, so it's not just like a big old bite of plain pastry crust. And then I'm going to grab another spoon here.
See, I did mine about 2 inches to the edge, but I didn't make a savory one with a thing underneath of it.
Yeah,
layer. But I also like
the
pie crust.
Right. Well, this is a tasty crust, but I like the way it looks too. When like the filling is sort of peeking out from underneath the edges here. This recipe, by the way, with the mushrooms is really, really good with bacon if you want to go like full Hobbit.
Oh,
but I want to make sure that
good.
like we were staying vegetarian if people wanted that. But yeah, if you want to crisp up some bacon and like chop it up and add it to this. All right, so can you see right now? Can you see my round here relatively well?
Yes, you are good on the screen. I can see your whole parchment except for the very front corner.
Okay, so I'm going to start folding on this side here. And you just you fold over a little bit, and then you're going to fold over another section like this. And you just keep going around like that. And this is where it is definitely easier to have cold dough to work with. And it doesn't stick as well. It doesn't stick as much to the parchment paper. But you're just picking up a little bit at a time and folding it over on itself. And one of the nice things about galettes is they're sort of meant to look rustic, like they look well. And then you can kind of like poke it back into a more circular shape if you got a little out of your disc. And there you go, that's it. And you've made yourself a little handle for when it's baked. And I'll put it on the pan so you can see it more easily here. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, so it's got like a little crust, so it's, sort of like a little butter pastry pizza here. And I'm going to put this one in the oven right away while we make the apple one so it has a chance to start baking. My oven's preheated to 425, and I'm going to start off with 10 minutes of baking, then we'll check it and probably add on another 7 or so. But I am kind of obsessive about like checking things as they're baking. We're going to start with 10 solid minutes of baking and then just kind of go from there. All right, timer set, so we do not forget that. As a baker, I am absolutely paranoid about timers because I still forget them. Like, I have been doing this for 6 years, and I still forget to set a timer. And like, oh man,
My kids
nothing worse.
cannot understand how I know how long 20 minutes feels. It's because I've forgotten my timer so much.
Yeah, I am like preternaturally sensitive to a 10-minute increment of time. I can, like, if I'm aware that there's something in the oven, I generally go over and start like waiting for the timer to go off at about 30 seconds till. If I remember that there's something in the oven.
We use one of those assistant things. You call its name. I don't want to call its name or it's going to be summoned.
Yes, I know. I know her. She's in my house too.
I'll ask it how much time is left, and it'll be like 2 minutes or like 20 seconds, and my kids would just look at me like, "What?" It's just that 20 minutes. I've just got it internally, but only for baking. I can't do it any other time.
So with this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the apples, which they've been sort of sitting in their syrup water after I blanched them, and I'm going to sprinkle some cinnamon on them and then put them onto the galette. And most of the sweetness, I'm sorry, I forgot the cinnamon in my pantry here. Most of the sweetness in this recipe is going to come from the blanched apples and the caramel sauce we're going to put on top of it. And I strongly recommend using putting some vanilla ice cream on top of this as well. And we're just gonna like fan them out like this, starting at the center, and we'll add more as needed. I love doing this with apples, or like when you make ratatouille, the way that Lenny makes it in the cartoon. Like anytime you get to like arrange vegetables or fruit beautifully, I make these custard tarts that are topped with fresh fruit. They're just one of my favorite things to make because they always look so pretty. And when you have time to make a big one and really like arrange all of your strawberries and raspberries and kiwi slices and things on top, they're just so pretty.
We had somebody ask if it helps if your counter is chilled. Do you chill your counter?
I don't. It certainly would. God, I'd love to have a chilled countertop. You guys see that guy who does like the chocolate creations on TikTok?
Yes.
He's always making like an entire cathedral out of chocolate or something. He's making like the TARDIS from chocolate.
Yes.
I know that countertop is chilled. And like every time I watch him do one of those videos, I'm like, I'm so jealous of your countertop. And your funding, obviously, but Okay, and then we're just going to kind of fill in this middle bit with a couple of pieces here, because we really don't want any piece of this to not be covered with delicious apple. And I'm going to, once again, sort of push it out to the edges here with just some of my spare pieces. So this is one entire Granny Smith apple that I'm using on this larger galette here. Normally, I'd probably use, for an individual galette, I'd probably use about half that much. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing. Again, this is easier when it's cold because it's kind of floppy right now. But we're making do. My kitchen is going to smell so good. This is the time of year too, because like it's starting to cool off. It was kind of warm yesterday. We were at the Run Fair yesterday, and that was our third time we've been this year. And
No.
like, it's not even enough though. Like, I would literally go every weekend. I'd love to work there, but unfortunately, it's about an hour away from me. Um, and and unfortunately, also weekends are like that's when people go out and buy pastries. So,
Right. Right.
but it was our third time, and the very first time we went was my absolutely favorite kind of fair day because it was overcast and drizzling, and so
And
there were
everyone
very
clears
few
it
people.
out.
Oh yeah. The only people there are like the die-hard Rennies, right? And so everyone is in full costume. There's like I'd say maybe a quarter of the people who are normally there, but everything is still going on and it's cool, so you can wear like your really good costumes. You're not gonna
Yes.
sweat. Oh man, it was lovely. And then we went yesterday, and it's the last weekend, so it was absolutely jam packed, and it was 90 degrees, and I was just like, it's so dusty, so dusty. We like all of us have, you know, froggy throats, and nobody could breathe last night. Everyone was snoring because it was so dusty. I'm looking for my scraper. There it is. You don't have a pastry scraper and you want to make pastry, get yourself a pastry scraper. It is the tool, okay?
Yeah.
Because like whatever about the actual pastry dough, this right here, this cleanup action, I will never get tired of it. Boom.
I want a huge one so I can pick up my whole pie with it and just scrape the whole thing off.
Oh yeah. Have you tried though? Like, do you do the rolling pin trick? There's something very satisfying, very like Italian grandmother about
Yes.
that, you know?
So not all gluten-free doughs will do that. Some of them you have to roll where they're gonna be.
Yeah.
This one did really well. It's movable, but I made the poor decision to fill it not on the tray, and it didn't like that, so it leaked this morning.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. That's
that's okay. It's gonna be
But they still
delicious.
taste good. They still taste good.
And I have baby ones that worked. Like
That's honestly,
they're
the bigger they get, like the more unwieldy they get. Oh wait, let me see. I didn't see. Oh, they're
There's the
so
baby.
cute.
and they did really good. Like this is the color you want on the bottom.
You can hear the crunchy.
Yeah. So like these are gonna be good. But I just peeled extra dough off when I'm like, there's a hole. I'm gonna just make baby ones to show everybody because.
But that's something I like so much about this dough is you can make them in any size, and the bigger they get, the more unwieldy they're gonna get. So honestly, like little ones, it's a really tasty dough. So.
And there's just like 1 tablespoon of inside in those. So.
All right, that's got 3 minutes, and then when it hits the 10-minute mark, I'm gonna pull it out. I'm gonna season it with some salt and pepper because I totally forgot to do that. And then we're gonna put some of the Gruyere on top so that it can melt on the top, but not burn. Yeah. I was going to initially put a little bit of white wine into the mushrooms. You can do that while they're sautéing because the alcohol will cook off, and it adds like a little bit of flavor. But a lot of times when you're adding wine, like especially a white wine like that, it's at least partly for acid. And the chèvre has a nice tangy quality to it, so I don't think we're going to miss it. We'll be okay with that. Do we want to talk about like favorite fantasy
We totally can.
food?
We
Like
totally
books
can.
that got you into that idea? I have right
Okay.
here.
You have a
Oh, go
list?
ahead. Well, I just
go. You go. It's your thing. You're first.
I have the Redwall cookbook here. If you've never, so obviously Redwall is like a lot of people's fantasy food introduction, right? Because they're constantly feasting, and it's all of these animals. The very first one starting out in the Redwall Abbey, but they're always feasting, no matter where they are. Like every book contains multiple descriptions of really delicious sounding food, but they're also all like. The good guys are all like prey animals. So there is no meat. Yeah. And I want to say they're mostly, I think they eat fish, but like the dairy is all like plant derivative too. and it's described in incredible detail. And I think it was Misty was telling me actually that Brian Jacques said that one of the reasons he did that was he wanted to make sure that blind children who read his books would be able to access like the descriptions of the food. And in general, Redwall has like really rich descriptions. It's just a real pleasure to read, like very, very cozy in a lot of aspects. But this is a cookbook that he wrote. It has a story in it featuring some of like the well-known Redwall characters, and it also has these recipes. We have made several of these recipes, and they're awesome. Like they're really good, and they're very accessible for like kid cooks too, or beginner cooks. So let me grab that.
Yeah, that is so cool. I did not know that about why he described the food so much. That's awesome.
That's so sweet.
My ring light's dying, so I'm gonna get dark here, I think.
I'm just putting some cracked pepper and salt on this. I forgot to stop the timer.
So the first thing that ever made me want to eat fantasy food was actually not a book. Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland. When that came out on VHS, I wanted those cookies so bad. So bad. They're pastel and like they look like little clouds. And I'll never get it because I don't know what they are. But I want them so bad still.
And they're not like macaroons or something?
They've got to be somewhere around macaroon and some other meringue kind of baked thing, and like wedding cookies that have a million different names somewhere in that area, but I don't know.
Very light, fluffy, airy confectionery.
But then Legends and Lattes is what made me think I should maybe put these things in a book where they're inspired by all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Because I've been doing recipes for like 8 years, and I had to come up with cinnamon rolls just because of Legends and Lattes. I couldn't take it anymore.
I make sourdough cinnamon rolls, and I developed the recipe for myself. And yes, there's nothing like fresh cinnamon rolls. There's a reason they hold that place in the baking hierarchy. The other, I think a lot of people associate like a certain amount of fantasy food with is Lord of the Rings, because the hobbits are so obsessed with food, and they talk about food all the time. And you know, like even when they're out, you know, journeying across the wastes, there's a certain focus on food. Like that's something that Sam does in the middle, you know, of Mordor. Is he's trying to scrounge up stuff, and he's got his little thing of seasoning and his little thing of salt. I found this one just at Costco, I think, but somebody published a Tolkien-based cookbook, and we've made a bunch of stuff from this as well. And these are really solid recipes as well. I don't know about their lembas recipe. Like, I'm not convinced. Like, it's kind of cornbread. But like a lot of the other stuff in here, and they group it like by, you know, group. There's like dwarven stuff, and there's elven recipes. Even Gollum gets a recipe. It's like a raw fish. It's like a poke recipe. Yeah, it's actually like it's really good. It's one of our favorites. But yeah, I think it's interesting because like I've been asked several times when I've been doing a live, and people ask like how the book is going. You know, do you put food in your book? And there are several discussions of food in the book that I've written, but because the one that I've written is so satirical, like the discussions of food are almost poking fun at certain like fantasy food assumptions or conventions. So it's sort of weird, but I have another book that I wrote and very nearly finished before I started writing this one, that I do intend to go back and revise and finish. And it does have much more focus on food. And it's interesting to see where food pops up. I think of like, actually one of the catalysts for me writing the original book, the one that I like put on hold in order to be silly on TikTok was it was I'm sorry, not Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss's Name in the Wind. I started writing the first book because that book pissed me off so much because he talks about Kvothe like making bread, and he describes this like bread making, and Kvothe is such a Mary Sue, like he's so good at everything, and he just like whips up some sourdough bread, and I was like, that's not how it's. I was just like, got you, no, and I was like, I'm gonna write a book. So there's a certain amount of like bread making in that first book. But yeah, I think that it's sort of funny. Like for me, that was one of the things that I liked his description of, like, let's take a break from this adventure storyline. Let's make some stew. Tell me what everyone's eating. They gotta be hungry. Look at all the stuff they've been doing. They're in a tavern. You know, that's what taverns do. They serve ale, they serve food. So what's the food like? And I think that's kind of a unique thing about the genre. I'm trying to think, aside from the romance genre, you know, where people talk about eating chocolate cake and things like that and having nice dinners together, which is very romantic. Are there other genres that have this like association with like delicious, hearty food? Because I really think that is something in the fantasy genre.
I think that cozy fantasy has really taken it and run with it with the food descriptions, because I was trying to prepare for this. I was trying to think of all the fantasies that I could think of that had food in it. And one of my favorite is Tamora Pierce. I love the Protector of the Small. That's my favorite. Kel is the best. But food is like an afterthought. They go eat, but they don't talk about what they're eating. Or it's stew. That's just it. It's stew. And so I was sad because I was like, I can't make those things.
Yeah, I mean, stew is fun, I think. In soups in general, like they have this very autumnal, you know, because they're a hot food, they're a warming food, they're a comforting food. You can also kind of make them with whatever you have on hand. Like you can, like ask Samwise, you can make a good stew, you know, no matter where you are. You just need a couple of things.
I mean, I like stew, but it just wasn't very descriptive.
No, because you're like, well, what kind, was it a beef stew? A rabbit stew? What was in it? A brace of
All I know is that she had to spit it out because she had to talk.
I was actually thinking, because I was looking for other like really influential fantasy author like food descriptions, and this one's more YA, but Patricia Reed's Enchanted Forest series, like food is a major focus because Cimarine, that's how she basically gets herself into the princess employment of her dragon, is that she's really good at making cherries jubilee, and that's something I think the dragon really enjoys. I can't remember the dragon's name off the top of my head, but she cooks quite a lot in that book when she is not studying Latin.
Tell us.
Sword fighting. Yeah, somebody look up who was Cimarine's dragon. I can't remember. And one of her I know Morwen, and Morwen I think makes cookies and things. Like I think Morwen bakes.
I know she makes apple cider or some kind of cider.
Yes, that's right. I'm pretty sure it's apple cider. Yeah, she brews too, which is fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there was a sort of domestic focus in those books that I loved that very much about Patricia Reed's writing, because she was capable of saying, you know, like, here are some lovely, very like domestic things that are very enjoyable, and you don't have to choose, you know, whether you are a domestic woman or whether you are an adventure woman. You can do both of those things. And I think one of the other princesses that Cimarine befriends is actually a really terrible cook, but she sort of fits the bill a little bit better, like appearance-wise, you know. And Cimarine actually has to like, I don't know that princess ever actually learns to cook very well, but it's just sort of, I liked that so much, especially when I was around 11 years old reading those books and just being like, yeah, I can cook, and you can't put me in a box.
Kazul is the dragon from chat.
Kazul, that's right. Kazul. Love Kazul. She had, to me, she shared a certain amount of space with like Terry Pratchett's witches. And I think the Tiffany Aching books, like I wouldn't say they're food centric, but they have that same, there's, and Terry Pratchett too, like he talks about food in his books in multiple ways, like in funny ways, like Dibbler's pies. That's a running joke, right? Like they're the worst pies. No one knows what's in them, but everyone eats them. Like you just do. It's you know, it's essentially London street food. Like that's what he's describing is like this greasy mess that you don't even want to know. Just don't ask. Just eat it. And then Tiffany with all of her cooking.
I actually discovered that I have not read Terry Pratchett. I probably only watched the films that were based on it. But when I was looking it up for this, I was like, this feels like Mrs. Lovett's meat pies.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a common thread.
It's not cozy to me.
No, it's not, and yet there's sort of it's like a comfort food thing. Like the joke is that they are in fact disgusting, but you know, people eat comfort foods that are objectively pretty bad for you, or that like people who didn't grow up with that food don't really understand why you like it, but it's evocative in the same way that, you know, like reading about cozy fantasy stuff, it evokes a feeling. And so like food is part of that. It's such a strong like sense memory that like I love the inclusion of these disgusting street pies as like people who in Terry Pratchett books are homesick think of these pies. They're not saying the pies are good. They're homesick for this food. And I love that about like the associations that food has in that setting. I'm trying to think if there are any other, like, it's got 30 seconds left on that, and I think it's going to need a little bit longer. I might raise the rack to get the top a little bit more brown. Oh my gosh, we're running out of time. I got to get this apple one in here. Okay, I will be right back.
Go for it. I know I'm a writer, but like I have been a bad reader lately, guys. Don't come at me. I don't remember a lot of the things I used to read unless I read them a lot. And I start a lot of new things and don't finish them. That would be the neurodivergence. I can't focus on that anymore. But some of the stuff that I have started, Kimberly Lemming, she... And here's the neurodivergent. I can't remember the name, but I love the books. Oh my god. Don't mind me, I'm just Googling. Okay, that's it. That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. I've started that one. Love it. And they own like spice farms, and so there's a lot of talking about the smell of the spices, and that's great. And then she's making all these different kind of, some of them are kind of Cajun inspired, and I think some of the book maybe I haven't eaten a lot of the foods, so I couldn't say for sure. But they sound so good, and they just killed an alligator and are gonna make something with the alligator, and I'm like, yes, I'll have some. I like all the meats.
Same, like I am a meat eater, but also like I do love it when an author, you know, is maybe from a different background from myself, especially, you know, in a culinary sense, and brings that into the story with love for whatever that food is, because again, it's just something that I'm really interested in. And when it's worked into the story, because, you know, food is attached to our history, it's attached to, you know, different environments, different places that people are from. And so when that's woven into the story, it really does create a point of reference and interest that like any human can access, because we all eat. You know, and we all have the experience of eating something delicious, whatever that thing is. So I love that. I don't know if you watched Arcane. Did you see the show Arcane? There's a season 2 coming out in November, I think.
Doesn't sound familiar.
There's a sequence where they go back to like the slums where one of the characters grew up, and she's with her like city-born, very like high-born family girlfriend crush, and she goes to this like pub or bar that she used to go to when she lived back in this, very, very downtrodden area, and starts eating this food, and she's just scarfing it down, like just wolfing down what looks really inedible. Like it just looks dreadful, but she is enjoying it so viscerally. And like, it was obviously set up to point out like these are two people from two very different places. But it also like it communicated a lot of other things. She has pride in where she's from. She knows it's not a nice place to be from. She knows it's a dangerous place to be from, but she's still proud to be from there, and she's not going to hide the fact that she likes the food. And I love that. I think food is a really like strong communicator in a lot of ways of, those character traits and those character interactions and backstory. And I just think it's really accessible.
So we've just got a message winding down in about 15 minutes. Do you have enough time, or do you need a little more for that last one?
If I could have another 10 minutes, that would be great. If that's at all possible.
I will check.
If it's not, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. I'm gonna make sure I've got the ice cream is scoopable.
Somebody in the chat said alligator is good. I actually do know that. I've only had it fried though. We went to a big wild game feast. We're in a rural area, so that's a thing here. But I like it because I like to eat meats. That's good. It's my favorite thing, especially since gluten's out.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever had alligator. I know I can get it around here. It's not as common because Missouri doesn't have alligators, but Louisiana isn't that far away. There's alligators. We're alligator adjacent. I don't think I've ever had it.
They just brought in a lot of not weird, a lot of things we don't usually eat here. Mm-hmm. And it was all good. It was all good. It was all fried, so you can't hardly go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there are some pretty fail-safe ways of cooking things. I'm trying to think if there was anything else about the galettes that I really need to pass on. But honestly, they're just not that hard. And you can, like I said, you can kind of put anything on them. So let's see how the mushroom one is doing here.
The gluten-free dough was really nice. Like it came together great. It feels like pie crust dough should feel like. It rolls it's a little more difficult than yours, but maybe it's my technique. I am a little more slapdash, not quite as experienced. But
and honestly,
it's really nice.
Pie crust can just be kind of tricky anyway.
Yeah.
But the crumbliness is part of it, because that's what's going to make it delectable, melt in your mouth pastry.
I do mine longer than you do yours. Like my big one came out about like this also, with the brown spots and stiff on the bottom.
This
I don't want anything to be raw.
So you can see that's how it shook out, and it's nice and bubbly on the top. So we're going to give it just a minute, and hopefully get the apple one out before we cut into that. I'm going to move the apple one up a little bit.
I didn't bring my cut. I'm just going to rip into mine because I didn't bring my cutter. We're just going to get messy.
It smells good.
And anybody who wants the recipe cards, you can go to my TikTok. The first video I ever made is for Hearthcon. You can watch the cards go by, or I think I also put links in where you can get the cards for a while after this. And I might talk to Misty and Jolly about where to put them for future use.
Yeah, because I will definitely, once that information is available, I'll also disseminate that. I'm just putting a little bit of fresh thyme on top because I really like thyme.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, decorative. I do
And
love
it's
like
fresh. That's so good.
It smells so good. You can definitely use dried thyme. If you're using dried herbs, though, like rule of thumb is to double it, I think. The fresh ones they just pack a lot more flavor.
For those who don't have TikTok, because there's coming across in the chat, I might be able to put the links in the chat later. I have to check on how to best send it. It might be their website. It might be chat and this. I'll see what I can do.
So I've got the apple one. Is probably going to be about another 10 minutes. So I don't know if we're going to have time to pull that one out.
I don't know. Jolly hasn't responded.
Hopefully they won't just cut us off.
Yeah.
But I'm going to cut into this one while we're here. And I just cut them like a pizza.
Go for it. That's what I did. I used a crinkle cutter, though, to like, rock it back and forth.
Uh-huh. That's nice. I should get one of those. It seems like the bottom turned out nice and crispy. So, let me see. That's what we got going on. It's really hot, so I'm going to eat it with a fork rather than just put molten cheese directly in my mouth.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm asking if we can get more time. And I forgot my camera is on my screen and tilted it. All right. Let's see. Oh, yeah. That's a good crunch. It's a good crunch. And like, I'm going to get my computer filthy. So it's hard to get these layers like this sometimes in gluten-free, and it just did beautifully. And yeah, now I got crumbs on my keyboard. My filling's blueberry. I have its recipe up too. I just have a lot of blueberries in the freezer. I love it.
That was a good crunch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
I
really
like
good.
it really crispy, so I do a little long. You could probably take it out like at 20 minutes for mine, but I put it into like almost 30 minutes. I like it crunchy. Super crunchy. Also, our savory, we did pizza. And you can fold it in, or you can leave it flat. Left it flat for the kids because they didn't know what I was doing. But for the testing, we tested savory pizzas.
One of my most popular galettes at the market that I sell at is a tomato galette, and it's just crust with a cream cheese and mozzarella blend. And then I put big slices of tomato on top, and I put everything bagel seasoning on top of that.
Oh my gosh.
It's really, really good. That's one of my favorite ones personally, and it's a customer favorite. I have people who special order them by the dozen. And then just, eat them all week long. They're really good. But yeah, this is just so versatile. You can just do, you can put whatever you want. People call them, the reason I thought of them is because people call them like, what are those like pizza pastries that you make? They kind of look like pizzas, especially with the tomatoes on top.
Yeah, they did. I've been stalking your TikToks a little bit. Sorry, gave you a bump in views to get ready for this. But yeah,
no worries.
If anybody's in your area, they need to go out and try them. They look delicious, like little hand pies. I wouldn't be able to get home with it.
I'm so excited because I'm about to start, now that I have like the bakery facility and it's been inspected and everything, and I'm going to do my grand opening in 2 weeks. And like I have a little front room for, selling straight out of the bakery. And because I'm selling on premises, I can do sausage rolls. And like sausage rolls is a thing that I have just been obsessed with making and selling for a really long time. And now that I finally can, I mean, like I made all my own sausage meat. Like I hand ground all of my pork shoulder and added all the spices and got them all like shaped and ready to go. And I'm testing my dough. It'll probably be some variation of this dough, actually. I don't want it to be too greasy because of all the sausage, but like I am beyond excited to start selling sausage rolls because that's just been such a goal. That is like, for me, that is one of the coziest foods because it's just a little handheld thing. And it's like a pie, but you could take it on an adventure.
Well, the next thing I want to try with mine is to make hand pies, which is honestly, it's a pie calzone. It's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In my family,
or like
that's
an
what they
empanada.
look like. Yeah.
I feel like most cultures have some variety of hand pie because like it's a very human thing to want to like hold a little thing in your hands that you can eat, like a little package food thing,
So that's where this recipe's going next. Okay, Jolly approved our more time, so hopefully you should be able to get out your next one and show it off.
I'm checking it. It's coming along. We're just waiting for that crust to brown as I go through eating this galette all by myself.
I mean, if mine wasn't so crunchy, I'd be eating it still.
I'm over here like
it
crunchy
into
that earpiece. But this is also like, this is why I like to put the filling out to the edge so that the crust rolls over the filling so that like every single bite has filling and crust in it. I don't like getting to the edge of the crust and like, don't get me wrong, the crust is good, but I'm not one of those people who just eats bread. My kids are. Like, I know plenty of people who will just eat bread. It's a great compliment. Like, just, delighted to see you eat a roll with nothing on it that I made. But for me personally, bread is a vehicle to convey something else to my mouth, like cheese, for example, or sausage, or like, whatever it is. So yeah, for me, I don't like getting to the end of like my pizza or my galette or whatever and having just the bread part. So I love putting the filling like folded under the crust so that every single bite is extraordinary.
I'm a bread girly, and that was the real shame of it when I couldn't do gluten anymore. But I'm gonna do this crust also. I'm gonna just do cookie cutters and do some cinnamon sugar, and just make crispy cinnamon sugar things. I've got plans for this crust. I'm so glad that I joined you because it is so good.
So glad.
It turned out so great.
I just, especially like this is the time of year too when, people start really ramping up their baking game.
Oh, yeah.
And you can do anything with it. It's just so fun. You can put fresh fruit on it. You can put, I did one last weekend that was butternut squash that I parboiled slices of butternut squash and I put it over a very similar cheese mixture of cream cheese and chèvre. And then I had browned butter sage just drizzled that. Oh my gosh, it was so good. I love winter squash. All of the fall foods like winter squash, mushrooms, baked things, cheeses. I am a red wall mouse. I would get along just fine in Hobbiton.
We have started our soups for the fall. It's great. My oldest is loving it. I don't care if anybody else loves it. We're doing good.
I'm also one of those people. I just bought yesterday. I was selling at the farmer's market as usual, and one of my co-vendors, they grew a bunch of different winter squash this year, and they have all the beautiful pumpkins like the jarndals and the kaboka squash and like all these like different varieties of wartinesses and colors. And like I love to decorate with winter squash so much. Like I will buy so many gourds and pumpkins of different sizes because not only do I get to put them all around and just admire them, in all of their wartiness and different colors, but I get to eat them later. I'm like a possum the way I decorate. Like I want to put food everywhere. Food is beautiful in all its forms, and then when I'm done looking at it, I'm gonna eat it. Like I buy all these
Nice.
squash, I put them everywhere, I decorate with them everywhere, and then one by one they disappear because we eat them. And I
That's
think it's like
great.
it's my
That is
favorite way to
awesome.
decorate. All right, I think we're getting really close here.
All right, good. We are all picky, but all in different ways. So, the cooking around here is a little bit of a challenge, even more so than just gluten and dairy free. But we are really ramping it up this fall. I'm like this close from making a TikTok series about gluten free baking. I've got
You
imposter
should,
syndrome
though.
so bad.
You should, because
I'm helping.
people need it, and it's one of those things where, people spend a really long time working out an individual, tailored recipe to make a gluten-free bread or to make a gluten-free pie crust. And it takes so long, and everybody has to do that work. Like if you're going to be gluten-free, you're going to have to do that. There is, to my knowledge, there is no one like gluten-free flour on the market that is just going to like suit everybody's needs. So
and they all do different things as well. Like even the mix that says it's a 1-to-1, it may be a 1-to-1, but it's only good for baking, or it may be a 1-to-1, but it's really better at thickening or whatever other thing. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna take this one out.
And since I want to write Feast and Fantasies, like fantasy inspired gluten free, I think that's what I'd start with. Would be all of the fantasy foods that I can think of and can do.
Absolutely. I think that would be so charming. So this could probably bake for a little bit longer, but because we did blanch the apples ahead of time, I know that they're going to be a nice consistency. They're not going to be underdone or anything, which is another advantage of doing that. Yeah. And then this is my caramel sauce here that I've just had on my warmer. If this were to cool off, this caramel sauce would kind of thicken up and even get like a little bit of a candy coating on it, but it's nice and warm right now. So I'm just going to drizzle it over there. And then when I find the ice cream, I will serve this with ice cream. And you can put the caramel sauce on this and then refrigerate it and just warm it up later. That absolutely works. So it's versatile that way. You can make it ahead. But I would recommend serving it like an apple pie, a la mode. You don't have to put the ice cream on it, but it's really good if you do. So serving this one warm, absolutely don't have to. We're gonna bust into it right now anyway.
Oh, that sounds good. It could use more, but it sounds good still.
Right. It would be better if it were a little crunchier, but like thyme is not my strong suit. That is not the kind of sorcery that I'm better at being immortal and living forever without the constraints of time. So that's what I tell myself. Anyway, so it's got a nice little wisp of steam. It's gonna burn my mouth, so I'm gonna use my.
Well, if you're gonna eat again, I get to eat again.
Yeah, everybody take a bite. It's an eating game. Every time someone says hobbit, you just take a bite.
I got overexcited. That was a big bite.
Well, hopefully it's not hot. It's really
good though. Y'all need to make this crust. I mean, mine, hers, whatever you can make. This crust is
so eating my own food, just being like,
right.
Oh, it's so good.
It is. I never had a galette before this. I've only had pies, and I was like, this is the thing. This is the new thing I love forever.
It's like if you want it, it's like a commitment-free pie. You know, I'm not like calorically, but like in terms of like time and effort, this is
I've used so much butter.
this is an extraordinarily easy like pie to make. This is like a pie origin story.
Super
Okay,
easy.
you know, proto
Super
pie.
easy. It's not for water pies. It's not for anything liquid. I love the kind of pie I love is my husband's family thing, and it wouldn't do well in this. So just keep that in mind. It's more of a fruits heavy, thick things.
Yes, and again, like if you wanted to do, say, like something, you know, like a pumpkin variation, any fruit, any baked fruit that you want to put on here, just do it closer to its natural state than like a pie filling. You know, so that's why we just, you know, blanch the apples instead of making like actual apple pie filling.
For my blueberries, I added extra cornstarch to the recipe so that it wouldn't be liquidy when it got finished.
Now I will say this, like I do make galettes where I put fresh fruit on, and what I do is I take cream cheese and I mix it with a little bit of vanilla and some sugar until it's like a sweet cheese, like you would put in a Danish. Put a layer of that on, just, you know, kind of a thin layer, and then I'll put fresh fruit, just, you know, fresh strawberries, just cut up strawberries, cut up fresh blueberries, raspberries on top of that. And the cheese will create like a little bit of a barrier. You could do the same thing with like a thickened coconut cream or something like that. But something to create a little barrier and just add a little bit of thickness and moisture and, you know, pie fillingness to it, and you're golden. It holds up really well for that too. Right. There you have it. Any last questions before we go?
Everybody thinks they look yummy. They are yummy.
Good.
They're yummy.
I think so. I'm enjoying them.
I'm gonna go eat some more after this. I got a big one downstairs that fell apart, but I'm gonna eat it.
I'm gonna finish that whole piece right there.
Yeah. So I think that's us good. Thank you everybody for attending. Do you have any other last tips on this that you want to throw out there?
I will only say that if you want to make a bunch of this dough and freeze it, the only tip I would give is, first of all, it freezes beautifully. And secondly, divide it into whatever like portioning you want to use. And then, you know, freeze it separated by like parchment paper or saran wrap or something like that. And then you can pull it out and whip one of these up whenever you want. It freezes amazingly.
I couldn't say that for the gluten-free one. I'm still testing. My overnight chilling may be what caused my mind to burst today. It might have been me trying to be quick. So I got testing still to do on how long out it can go. But it's really good to do same day, half hour, hour-ish chilling. But yeah, I think that's it for me.
I think that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Like, I had a really good time planning this, and now I have so much galette to eat on my Sunday.
So good. I'm so excited to go eat some more. So thanks everybody for attending.
And I hope you guys stick around for the rest of the Hearthcon today. I am going to be immediately joining the YouTube to watch everybody else's stuff.
Yeah, I gotta get
Sunday.
that on my other headphones.
Awesome.
So we're good. Thank you. Thanks for coming. I don't know how to end it. I don't know if I can end it or if Misty has to.
Misty and her wave. Goodbye.
I don't know.
Bye. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. I'm so happy you were here. We had lots of people watching from the live, and like, so many amazing, loving comments for everyone. So that's great. And the actual recording for Bette's video was better. It was high quality in the thingy.
Oh, good. Okay, so it was just the like delivery
weird, strange
system, the live. Okay. Yeah. And too bad. Good to know, though.
Really excited. Did it all turn out? Did all the baking taste good?
Yeah, they turned out beautifully. And
I think we're still live.
We are still live.
Okay.
Oh, we are. Okay, yeah. No, the Apple one.
Let's live. Bye, guys. Now we're back.